I kept my recovered hearing a secret to surprise my daughter at her birthday party. I thought I was giving her a miracle. But silence is a dangerous gift. Standing in the hallway, I heard her call me nothing more than equity trapped in rotting wood. Then I heard the schedule. It had a specific day and hour, and my name was listed right next to the word finish. My name is Evelyn Hartman. I am 58 years old, a widow, and a former nurse who knows exactly how fragile the human body is. I live in a drafty Victorian house in Hawthorne Ridge, a neighbourhood that used to be working class, but is now crawling with developers hungry for land. They look at my peeling paint and overgrown hedges and see dollar signs. For the last 3 years, I have been invisible to the world in a different way. A car accident took my husband and stole my hearing, leaving me in a world that felt like being permanently submerged underwater. I learned to read lips. I learned to write on legal pads. I learned to smile and nod when I had no idea what anyone was saying. Last week, Dr. Monroe changed everything. The experimental cochlear procedure was a success. The silence broke. Suddenly, I could hear the refrigerator humming and the terrifyingly loud scrape of a chair against the floor. I decided not to tell a soul. Not yet. My daughter, Kendra, had a birthday coming up in 2 days. I imagined the scene clearly. I would wait for the cake, wait for the singing to stop, and then I would speak to her in a normal volume and tell her I could hear her wish. It was going to be the perfect gift. Kendra has been my anchor. She comes over 3 times a week. She organizes my pillbox. She handles the piles of confusing insurance paperwork that make my head spin. I felt a heavy, constant guilt for being such a burden on her and her husband. Miles. They are young. They should be traveling or buying their own house, not babysitting a deaf widow. That gratitude died this morning at 8 o'clock. I was walking down the stairs. The 3rd step from the top always creaks, a sharp, high-pitched groan of old wood. I froze out of habit. But then I remembered that to them, I am a ghost who cannot hear her own footsteps. I stopped anyway. I heard voices drifting up from the kitchen. They were loud, careless, and comfortable. "We have to make sure the party looks reasonable," Miles said. His voice was impatient, the way a man sounds when he is late for a meeting he does not want to attend. "It will," Kendra replied. Her tone was steady, clinical. It was the voice she used when she explained my medication to me, but stripped of the fake sweetness. I invited all her old friends from the hospital. The nosy neighbor, Donna, is coming too. We need witnesses to see that she is confusing things. And the dosage Miles asked. I handled it, Kendra said. After the party, everything will go smooth. Everyone will think Mum just got weaker on her own. It happens all the time with trauma survivors. Cognitive decline is expected. I stood there, gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The air in the hallway suddenly felt freezing. Cognitive decline. Weaker on her own. They were not talking about a nursing home. They were talking about an erasure. I slowly backed up the stairs, placing my feet carefully on the edges of the steps to avoid the creak. I retreated into my bedroom and closed the door with a soft click. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the framed photo of Kendra on my nightstand. She was smiling, holding a diploma I had worked double shifts to pay for. For 3 years, I thought my deafness was a curse. I realized in that terrifying moment that it might have been the only thing that kept me alive this long. If I had heard this conversation a month ago, I might have screamed. I might have run down there and demanded an explanation. But I was a nurse. I know how to handle a crisis. You do not panic. You assess the vitals. You check the chart. You observe. I wiped a cold tear from my cheek. I would not give them the surprise I had planned. I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would be the deaf, confused old woman. I would let them talk. Because for the first time in 3 years, I held the most dangerous weapon in the house. I was listening. The house became a theatre, and I was the audience of one. For 3 years. I had moved through these rooms with heavy, clumsy steps, unaware of the noise I made. Now. I moved like a shadow. I wore my thickest wool socks to dampen my tread. I learned to breathe shallowly when I stood outside a door. I became a collector of sounds. I listened to the click of the medicine cabinet in the hallway bathroom. I heard the rustle of stiff paper being smoothed out on the dining table when they thought I was asleep. I heard Kendra making calls she thought vanished into the air the moment she hung up. On Tuesday afternoon, I stood by the open kitchen window. The breeze was warm, carrying the scent of the jasmine I had planted with my husband 20 years ago. Kendra was on the back patio, pacing. I could hear the gravel crunching under her heels. "Mom is deaf. It is convenient," Kendra said into her phone. Her voice was light, casual, as if she were discussing the weather. "She does not understand anything anyway. I can talk right in front of her." I gripped the edge of the granite countertop. My own daughter. The girl I had taught to ride a bike on this very driveway. The appraisal came in higher than we thought. She continued. "The house is worth nearly $1 million. With the market in Hawthorne Ridge spiking, we need to move fast. But it is best if everything happens after the party. We need people to remember I was dutiful. Whatever happens next needs to look natural." My stomach churned. Natural. That was the word used for deaths that were expected, for declines that were inevitable. She was scripting my end to finance her beginning. Later that evening, the truth about Miles unraveled. Kendra had told me for months that Miles was busy with a massive architectural project downtown. She would pantomime big building and drawing with an exaggerated smile whenever I asked where he was. But from the den, I heard the distinctive sound of a video game console starting up, followed by Miles's voice rising in frustration. "I am telling you, they denied the application again," Miles shouted, presumably at a friend on a headset. "I have been out of work for 8 months. Man, I have got nothing. If this house thing does not pay out soon, we are underwater." He was not an architect. He was a drowning man looking for a life raft. And I was the timber he planned to strip. I retreated to my bedroom and sat at my desk. I needed to see the shape of the trap. I pulled out my medical binder. Kendra had taken over managing it a year ago, insisting my eyesight was too poor for the small print. I flipped to the medication log. I stared at the pages for a long time. The entries for the last 2 months were written in blue ink. My hand tremor makes my writing jagged, spiky. These entries were smooth, round, and the dates were wrong. There were check marks for doses I did not remember taking, and notes in the margins that I had never written. Patient confused. Patient agitated. Patient refused dose. It was a fabricated history. They were building a paper trail of incompetence. I heard footsteps approaching. I quickly closed the binder and turned my chair to face the door just as Kendra walked in. She held a glass of water and a small paper cup with my evening pills. I decided to test the water. I looked up at her, making sure my face was slack, my eyes a little unfocused. Kendra, I said, letting my voice waver. I think I am losing track of time. Didalo. Lately, I feel so foggy. Did I eat dinner? I watched her face closely. A loving daughter would have looked concerned. She would have rushed to check my temperature or called the doctor. Kendra did not look worried. Her eyes lit up with a sharp, sudden brightness. It was the look of a gambler who just saw their winning card hit the table. "Oh, Mom," she said, speaking slowly and exaggerating her mouth movements, though she did not need to. "It is okay. You are just tired. I am here to remember for you. You do not need to worry about anything." She handed me the cup. I took it, my hand trembling not from age, but from rage. She thought I was fading. She thought her script was working. I swallowed the pills only after sliding the one I did not recognize under my tongue, a trick I had learned in the psych ward rotations 30 years ago. As soon as she left, I spat the bitter white tablet into a tissue and flushed it. I sat in the silence that was no longer silent. I heard the television downstairs. I heard them laughing. They had the keys. They had the bank accounts. They had the doctor on speed dial. I was trapped in my own house, surrounded by enemies who wore the faces of my family. I needed a weapon. But more than that, I needed a shield. I could not do this alone. I needed someone who knew the law, someone who knew how to document a crime before it was committed. I needed to leave the house tomorrow without them knowing. I reached for my old address book, buried deep in the bottom drawer. I turned the pages until I found the name I was looking for. Caleb Rourke. It was time to make an appointment. The phone felt heavy in my hand, like a loaded weapon. For the first time in 3 years, I did not ask Kendra to dial for me. I did not wait for her to hold the receiver to my ear and interpret the other side. I waited until she left for her yoga class, which I now suspected was a strategy meeting with Miles, and I dialed the number from memory. "Law Offices of Caleb Rourke," the receptionist answered. "This is Evelyn Hartman," I said, my voice steady. "I need to see Caleb. Today. And this is a private matter. My daughter is not to know." 2 hours later, I sat in Caleb's office. It smelled of mahogany and old paper, a smell that used to comfort me when my husband was alive, and we were just drafting standard estate plans. Now, it smelled like a battlefield. Caleb looked older, his hairline receding, but his eyes were sharp behind his wire-rimmed glasses. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and concern. "Evelyn, it is good to hear your voice clearly," Caleb said, leaning forward. "I must admit, I was worried. When Kendra came in last month, she painted a very different picture of your condition." My spine stiffened. "Tell me exactly what she asked." "Caleb?" Caleb hesitated, tapping a pen against his desk. He was bound by confidentiality regarding his clients. But I was the client. Kendra was just an inquirer. "She wanted to review the current will," Caleb said, choosing his words with legal precision. "She asked about the timeline for asset transfer. But more concerningly, she asked about the procedure for establishing power of attorney if the principal is deemed mentally incapacitated. She asked what kind of medical documentation is required to override a signature." The air left the room. It was not just a robbery. It was a character assassination. They were scripting a narrative where I was the senile, confused old woman, and they were the heroic guardians stepping in to save me from myself. "She is building a case for dementia," I said, the nurse in me analyzing the diagnosis. She falsified my medication logs. She is telling neighbors I am confused. If I die, or if I am institutionalized, she gets everything immediately. Doesn't she? Caleb nodded grimly and opened a file folder. Under the current will, yes. You leave the house, the savings, and the life insurance payout to Kendra Hartman. Miles is listed as the contingent beneficiary. It is a straight line. Very clean. Very easy. Tear it up, I said. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Evelyn, are you sure? If we do this, I said, tear it up. I interrupted, my voice hard. I want a new draft. I want 90% of my liquid assets moved into a trust. Call it the Hartman Emergency Medical Fund. It will be for nursing scholarships and emergency care grants. I want it locked down so tight that even a diamond drill cannot scratch it. And Kendra Caleb asked, leave her $10,000, I said. Just enough that she cannot claim I forgot her. If I leave her nothing, she can contest the will, claiming I made a mistake. If I leave her a specific, small amount, it is a deliberate choice. It is a message. Caleb typed furiously, the clacking of the keyboard sounding like gunfire. He stopped and looked at me over his glasses. Evelyn, if she is tampering with your medication, this is criminal. We should call the police right now. I can have a detective here in 20 minutes. No, I said instantly. Not yet. If we call them now, it is my word against hers. She has the fake logs. She has the witnesses she has been grooming. Miles is slippery. I need them to hang themselves. I need undeniable proof. Caleb sighed, clearly unhappy, but he nodded. Then he pulled a fresh sheet of paper from his drawer. If we are playing this game, we need a shield, Caleb said. If she challenges this new will later, her argument will be that you were not of sound mind when you signed it today. She will say you were paranoid, delusional. So how do I stop that, I asked. We do a formal medical legal capacity evaluation. Right now, Caleb said, reaching for his phone. I have a forensic psychiatrist who owes me a favor. He can be here in an hour. He will evaluate you, record the session, and certify that you are fully cognitive, rational, and aware of the consequences of your decisions. It creates a baseline. If Kendra tries to claim you were senile today, we slap this evaluation on the judge's desk, and her entire case crumbles. I looked at the empty chair where Kendra must have sat, asking how to legally bury her mother. Do it, I said. Call him. When I walked out of that office 3 hours later, the sun was blindingly bright. I had a folded copy of the new will hidden in the lining of my purse. I had a signed certificate of mental competency. I was not just a victim anymore. I was a woman with a plan. And for the first time, the law was on my side. Kendra thought she was writing the ending of my life, but she had no idea I had just rewritten the entire script. Caleb had been clear. In this state, I have the right to record conversations in my own home without the consent of the other party, provided I am part of the conversation or present in the dwelling I own. I stopped at an electronics store on the way back from his office and bought 3 small, black digital recorders. They were the size of a pack of gum. I taped one under the kitchen island overhang, one behind the decorative vase in the living room, and I kept the third one in the pocket of my cardigan, resting against my hip like a concealed firearm. Now the stage was set, and I had to play my part. If they wanted a confused, deteriorating old woman, I would give them an Academy Award performance. I started that very afternoon. When Kendra came in to check on me, I deliberately left the milk carton on the counter with the cap off. I sat in my armchair, staring blankly at a turned-off television. When she spoke to me, I delayed my reaction by 3 seconds, letting my eyes drift before focusing on her face. It worked like blood in the water. They became careless. The next morning, I shuffled into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and then shuffled out, pretending to head back upstairs for a nap. Instead, I stopped just around the corner, pressed my back against the wall, and waited. Kendra was on the phone. Her voice was low, but my new hearing caught every syllable. No. The dosage needs to be higher if we want her compliant by 7 o'clock, she said into the receiver. There was a pause. I know it is risky. That is why we have to separate her from the crowd when I give it to her. I will take her into the kitchen for quiet time. Once the meds hit, she will be slurring. Everyone will just think she's tired and confused. It sets the narrative perfectly. My hand clenched around the recorder in my pocket. Dosage. They were not just hoping I would act confused. They were going to chemically ensure it. Miles walked into the kitchen a moment later. I heard the heavy thud of his boots. Are the neighbors coming? He asked. Just a few? Kendra replied. We cannot exclude them, or it looks suspicious. Watch them, Miles said, his voice dropping to a growl. Especially that old nurse. Donna, do not let Mum talk to her alone. She is too believable when she speaks. If she starts making sense to an outsider, we have a problem. Keep her isolated. I retreated to my room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Too believable. That was their fear. My sanity was their enemy. That night, while the house slept, I opened my laptop. I did not need Kendra's help this time. I logged into the bank's portal. My hands shook as I typed. I changed every password. I set up 2-factor authentication to route to a burner phone I had bought with the recorders. I moved the bulk of my liquid savings into a new holding account at a different bank, leaving just enough in the main checking account to keep up appearances. Then I dug deeper. I pulled up the transaction history for the last 5 years and started scrolling. It was not one big theft. It was 1,000 tiny cuts. $50 here for groceries, $100 there for gas, a withdrawal of $200 from an ATM near Miles's old apartment. It went back years, long before I lost my hearing. They had been siphoning money from me. They had been bleeding me dry, drop by drop, while eating my food and smiling at my table. It was not a desperate act of recent poverty. It was a lifestyle funded by my blindness to their greed. I needed backup. I needed someone who knew what a drug overdose looked like. I picked up my phone and texted Donna. She was a retired ER nurse with eyes like a hawk and a tolerance for nonsense that hovered near zero. Donna, please come to the party tomorrow. Come early. And watch me. I need you to witness something. Her reply came 3 minutes later. I'll be there with bells on. Is everything okay? No. I typed back. But it will be. I walked to the window and looked down at the front porch. Kendra had already hung the decorations. A string of bright red balloons bobbed in the night breeze. To anyone passing by, it looked like a celebration of life. But as I watched them sway in the dark, I knew better. Those were not for a birthday. They were the set dressing for a tragedy. The party was not designed to celebrate my 59th year. It was designed to justify why I should not be allowed to have a 60th on my own terms. I touched the recorder in my pocket one last time. Let the party start. I was ready. The morning of my 59th birthday felt less like a celebration and more like the opening night of a complicated stage play where I was the prop rather than the protagonist. Kendra and Miles arrived at 10 o'clock sharp. They brought a large, cheerful banner that said, "Happy Birthday, Mom," a store-bought sheet cake, and a small, zippered bag that Kendra placed on the counter with the reverence of a holy relic. It was my medicine schedule. "Happy birthday," Mom, Kendra chirped, hugging me tight. Her perfume was overwhelming, masking the scent of the anxiety that radiated off her. "We want today to be perfect. You just sit. Let us do everything." Miles was already moving furniture. He took my favorite reading chair and shoved it into the far corner of the living room, away from the main flow of traffic. "The draft is bad near the window," Miles said, patting the upholstery. "This is the warmest spot. You stay here. Evelyn. We do not want you getting overwhelmed by the noise." By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the house was full. My old colleagues from the hospital, neighbours who had known me for 30 years, and a few of Kendra's friends filled the living room. The air buzzed with chatter. I sat in my assigned corner, smiling until my cheeks ached, playing the role of the frail, grateful matriarch. I watched Kendra work the room. She was masterful. She moved from group to group, accepting praise for her devotion with a humble tilt of her head. It has been hard. I heard her whisper to Mrs. Gable, the head of the neighborhood watch. Since the hearing procedure, her confusion has actually gotten worse. The doctor says it is post-operative cognitive dissonance. She forgets where she is. She forgets who we are sometimes. "You are a saint." "Kendra?" "Mrs." Gable replied, touching Kendra's arm sympathetically. "Most children would have put her in a home by now. I could never," Kendra said, her voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "But we are worried about her safety living alone." I gripped the armrest of my chair. She was painting me as incompetent before the first slice of cake was even cut. I looked toward the door and saw Donna enter. She caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod before blending into the crowd near the punch bowl. Around 3 o'clock, the noise level peaked. Miles caught Kendra's eye and tapped his wrist. It was time. Kendra made her way to me, her face arranging itself into a mask of concern. She knelt beside my chair, blocking me from the view of the other guests. "Mom?" she said softly, but loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "It is time for your afternoon medication. You know how dizzy you get if we miss the window." "I feel fine," I said, keeping my voice low. "Come on," she insisted, taking my hand and pulling gently. "Let's go to the kitchen. It is too loud out here. You need a quiet space to swallow them." I allowed her to lead me into the kitchen. Miles stood by the doorway, effectively blocking anyone from following. The kitchen was quiet. Kendra opened the zippered bag and popped 2 pills into her palm. They were not my usual white ovals. They were small and blue. "Here," she said, handing me a glass of water. "Take these." I looked at the pills in her hand, then up at her eyes. "What are these?" "Kendra. My blood pressure pills are white." Kendra didn't blink. "Dr. Monroe changed them. Mum, remember? We talked about this yesterday. You really are forgetting things fast." "I do not remember that," I said, letting a hint of stubbornness enter my voice. "Just take them." "Please," she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Do not make a scene. People are watching. Do you want them to see you acting crazy?" She shoved the glass toward me. I reached for the pills, my hand trembling intentionally. I needed to stall. I needed her to force it. Suddenly, the kitchen door swung open. Miles tried to step in the way, but he was not fast enough to stop Donna. She marched in, wearing her old nursing instincts like armor. "Happy birthday." Evelyn Donna boomed, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. She looked at Kendra, then at the pills in her hand. "Oh, medication time. Perfect timing." I brought my cuff. Kendra froze. "Your cuff blood pressure cuff," Donna said, pulling a stethoscope from her oversized purse. Evelyn looked a little flushed in the living room. As her former charge nurse, "I am not letting her take a single vasoactive medication until I check her vitals. Step aside." "Honey?" It was not a request. Donna bustled between us, effectively pushing Kendra back. "Oh, we have it under control," Kendra stammered, closing her hand over the blue pills. "She just needs to take these and rest." "Nonsense," Donna said, grabbing my wrist to check my pulse. "If she is flushed, her pressure might be up. If you give her medication on top of high pressure, she could stroke out. You do not want that on your conscience." "Do you?" Kendra looked at Miles. Miles looked at the floor. The script had been broken. I suppose a quick check is fine," Kendra said, her voice tight. I looked at Donna, then at my daughter. The fear in Kendra's eyes was real now. She was terrified of the medical truth. I took a deep breath. The recording device in my pocket felt warm against my side. I realized I did not have to be the victim in the corner anymore. "Actually," I said, my voice suddenly steady, shedding the tremor I had feigned all afternoon. "I think Donna is right. My heart is racing. Maybe we should check everything." I saw Kendra's knuckles turn white as she clenched the blue pills. The game had changed. I was not just watching anymore. I was starting to direct. I took the glass of water from Kendra's hand. Her eyes were fixed on my throat, watching for the swallow. I placed the 2 blue pills on my tongue, took a large gulp of water, and jerked my head back in a convincing pantomime of swallowing medicine. But the pills remained tucked safely under my tongue, bitter and chalky. I coughed, covering my mouth with a napkin, and in one fluid motion, I spat the pills into the folded paper and slipped it into my pocket next to the recorder. "Good." Kendra exhaled, her shoulders dropping. "You will feel better in a few minutes." I smiled at her, the sweet, vacant smile of a mother who trusts too much. "I am sure I will." "Dear." I walked back into the living room, but I did not return to my corner. I moved toward the center of the crowd. It was time to give them the show they had written for me. I approached Mrs. Gable, who was holding a paper plate of cake. "Oh, Martha," I said, blinking rapidly. I thought you moved to Florida years ago." "When did you get back, Mrs.?" Gable looked confused. "Evelyn, it is me. Sarah Gable. I live next door. I saw you yesterday." I stumbled slightly, catching myself on the arm of the sofa. My hand flew to my chest. "Sarah. No, Sarah is a little girl. You look like my mother." A hush rippled through the room. I saw Miles exchange a look with Kendra from across the room. It was a look of triumph. The drugs were supposed to be kicking in, making me incoherent. "Oh, dear," Kendra said, rushing to my side and gripping my arm with a force that bruised. "Mom, you are confused again. It is the medication reacting with the excitement. Everyone. I am so sorry. She gets like this in the afternoons. She tried to steer me away, but I made my legs heavy, dragging my feet. I feel so dizzy. I wailed, letting my voice crack. Why is the room spinning? Miles? Why are you wearing that mask? Miles, who was not wearing a mask, stepped forward, his face serious. Okay, folks, I think it is time to wrap this up. Mom is having an episode. We need to get her to bed before she hurts herself. The guests began to shuffle awkwardly, setting down their drinks. The air in the room was thick with pity. It was working perfectly. They were witnessing the disintegration of Evelyn Hartman. Then Donna stepped into the center of the circle. She did not look pitiful. She looked furious. "Wait a minute," Donna said, her voice commanding the room. She looked at Kendra. "That reaction is too fast for an oral sedative. What exactly did you give her in the kitchen?" Kendra's smile faltered. "It is just her blood pressure medication." "Donna, please, do not make this harder than it is. Blood pressure meds do not cause hallucinations in 5 minutes." Donna snapped. "I want to see the bottle. Show me the label." "Kendra." "I do not have to show you anything," Kendra yelled. Her voice was shrill, ugly. It was the first time the mask had slipped in public. The guests froze. The dutiful daughter had vanished, replaced by a frightened, angry woman. "Why are you so defensive if it is just blood pressure medicine?" a neighbor asked from the back. "Because this is a private family matter," Miles shouted, stepping between Donna and Kendra. "Everyone needs to leave. Now." The vibe in the room shifted from awkwardness to suspicion. The urgency was too high. The anger was too raw. I decided it was time. I pulled away from Kendra's grip. I did not stumble. I did not sway. I stood up to my full height, straightened my cardigan, and took a deep breath. I let the vacancy drain from my eyes, replacing it with the sharp, cold clarity of a woman who has been underestimated for 3 years. "No one needs to leave," I said. My voice was not the wavering, confused voice I had used all day. It was strong. It was resonant. It projected to the back of the room. Kendra froze. She looked at me, her mouth slightly open. "Mom," she whispered, You need to sit down." "I am done sitting down," I said, looking at the faces of my friends and neighbors. "I am fine. My mind is clear. And I have something to say before anyone walks out that door." I turned slowly to face Kendra. She looked small suddenly. The power dynamic in the room had inverted in a single second. "You told everyone I was confused," I said, stepping closer to her. "You told them I was forgetting names. You told them I was fading away." "Mom!" "Stop," Kendra hissed, her eyes darting around the room. "You are making a scene." "No." "Kendra," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. "I am making a statement. You just told Miles in the kitchen that I was deaf and it was convenient. You said, 'Mom cannot hear, so I can say whatever I want.'" The room went deathly silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I locked eyes with her. "But you were wrong. I got my hearing back weeks ago, and I have heard every single word." Kendra's face went the color of ash. She took a step back, her heel catching on the rug. But she did not fall. She just stared at me, the blood draining from her lips, as she realized that the silence she had relied on was the very thing that was about to destroy her. "I have been hearing everything for 3 weeks," I announced. My voice was level, stripping away the trembling act I had perfected all afternoon. I heard you in the kitchen. I heard you on the patio. I heard you selling my life piece by piece while I sat right next to you." Kendra laughed, but the sound was brittle, like glass stepping on stone. She looked around at the guests, her eyes wide and pleading. "Mum, please," she said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "You are having a delusion. This is the anesthesia talking. It is side effects. You are imagining things. Everyone. Please, she is not well. I am perfectly well," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small black recorder. I held it up so everyone could see the red light that had been blinking all afternoon. I pressed the play button. The silence in the room was absolute. Then, Kendra's voice, tinny but unmistakable, drifted through the living room speakers. "The appraisal came in at 950,000. Once the party is over, we move. She won't know the difference. Just make sure she takes the pills before the guests leave so she looks out of it." Then Miles's voice cut in, sharp and impatient. "Just keep her isolated. If she talks to Donna, we are screwed. We need that money. Kendra." I stopped the recording. The silence that followed the revelation was heavier than the one before. It was the silence of a verdict being read. Donna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mrs." Gable took a step back from Kendra as if my daughter were contagious. "That is out of context," Miles shouted. He was backing toward the hallway, his eyes darting to the front door. "You are recording us. That is illegal. We are leaving. You are not going anywhere," I said. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out the clear plastic sandwich bag. Inside, the two blue pills rattled against each other. I held them up to the light. I did not swallow them. "Kendra," I said, "and I am not a chemist, but I am fairly certain the lab will find that these are not for blood pressure. I am handing this evidence over to the authorities for verification." "Authorities," Kendra whispered. Her face was grey. "Mom." "What did you do?" As if on cue, the sound of sirens cut through the suburban quiet. It started as a low wail and grew rapidly into a deafening scream. Blue and red lights began to flash against the living room window, painting the horrified faces of my guests in strobes of colour. "I called them 10 minutes ago," I said. "I told them there was an active attempt to endanger a vulnerable adult. My lawyer sent over the evidence regarding the financial theft this morning." Miles bolted. He lunged for the front door, shoving past Mrs. Gable. But the door burst open before he could touch the handle. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, blocking his path. Kendra did not run. She crumbled, but she did not fall to her knees in repentance. She lunged at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. You ruined everything," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "We were going to lose our condo. You have this big house. You do not even use the upstairs. You selfish old witch. You ruined my life." She did not care that I was alive. She did not care that I could hear. She only cared that the check she had written on my life was going to bounce. The officers moved in. One grabbed Miles, pushing him against the wall. The other took Kendra's arm. "Kendra Hartman, you are under arrest," the officer said. I sat back down in my chair. I watched them twist my daughter's arms behind her back. She was still screaming about the money, about how unfair it was, about how much debt they were in. Then I heard it. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs locking was sharp, metallic, and final. It was a sound that signaled the end of my motherhood and the beginning of my survival. I closed my eyes and let the sound echo in my restored ears. I would never forget it. The silence that followed the arrests was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. The police investigation did not just confirm my suspicions. It unraveled a tapestry of malice that had been woven for weeks. Detective Miller sat across from me in his office, his face illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights of the precinct. On his desk lay the report from the toxicology lab. The pills were benzodiazepines. Mrs. Hartman, Miller said, sliding the paper toward me. A high dose. If you had taken 2 of these on top of your existing medication, you would not just have been confused, you likely would have stopped breathing. This wasn't just about guardianship. This was reckless endangerment. I stared at the report. My daughter had not just wanted my money. She had been willing to risk my life to get it. But the investigation revealed that the birthday party was merely the finale of a much longer performance. They found a shared calendar on Miles's laptop. It had entries going back 2 months marked with terms like sleep deprivation phase and disorientation tactics. They had been moving my keys, changing the clocks, and subtly gaslighting me to create a documented history of decline. Caleb called me the next morning with news that turned the knife even deeper. He had been tracing the small withdrawals I had found. It is not just random spending. Evelyn, Caleb said over the phone. The money wasn't going to grocery stores or gas stations. Those were cover labels. The funds were being funneled into a shell account under the name Apex Consulting. It looks like a legitimate business, but the address is a P.O. box in Nevada. How much, I asked, gripping the receiver. Over 3 years, nearly $40,000, Caleb replied. But here is the strange part. The payments are regular, monthly, like rent or interest. The picture became darker when Detective Miller called me back in for a second interview. He looked tired. He placed a mugshot on the table. It was Miles, but younger, with shorter hair. We ran your son-in-law's prints, Miller said. His name isn't just Miles Vaughn. 7 years ago, he was a suspect in an elder fraud case in Ohio. He befriended a widow, managed her renovation, and vanished when her accounts were drained. He was acquitted because the victim had dementia and couldn't testify reliably. He learned from his mistakes. This time, he made sure to marry into the target's family to secure his legal standing. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Miles was a predator. Kendra was not just a greedy daughter. She was the accomplice to a professional parasite. I cannot go home, I told Miller. The house. It feels like a crime scene. That is a good idea. Miller nodded. We need to process it anyway. Go to a hotel. Keep your location off social media. I packed a bag and drove to a nondescript motel on the edge of the city. I checked in under my maiden name. I thought I was safe. I thought the nightmare was confined to a jail cell downtown. I was wrong. At 9 o'clock that night, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it and felt my blood freeze. It was a photograph. The image was grainy, taken in low light, but it was unmistakable. It was the front gate of my house at Hawthorne Ridge, and it was taken from inside a car parked across the street. The timestamp was 2 minutes ago. Below the photo was a single line of text: "Don't make this bigger. Drop the charges or the house burns." I dropped the phone on the bed. Kendra was in custody. Miles was in custody. They could not have taken this photo. I called Detective Miller immediately. His voice was tense when he answered. "We were just about to call you." "Evelyn," Miller said. We are monitoring Miles's jail calls. He is panicking. He has made 6 calls in the last hour to a burner number. He is not asking for a lawyer. He is begging for time. Time for what I asked. My voice trembling. To pay someone back, Miller said. He keeps saying, the plan failed, but I can fix it. Just do not touch her. We think Miles owes money to someone dangerous. The $40,000 he stole from you. That wasn't for him. That was interest payments on a loan shark debt. I looked out the motel window at the dark parking lot. The shadows seemed to stretch and move. I realized then that the script hadn't ended with the handcuffs. Kendra and Miles were just the middle management, the real architect, the one who was hungry for my $1 million property to settle a debt, was still out there. And now that his payout was sitting in a jail cell, he was coming for the source. Mrs. Hartman Miller's voice was urgent. Are you safe? I do not know. I whispered. I thought I was just fighting my family. I did not know I was fighting a war. The visiting room at the county jail smelled of industrial bleach and unwashed bodies. Kendra sat on the other side of the plexiglass. She looked 10 years older than she had at the party. Her hair was unwashed, and her eyes were darting around the room as if the walls were closing in. I picked up the receiver. Why? Kendra? I asked. We had a good life. Why did you need it all right now? Kendra leaned forward, her breath fogging the glass. She was shaking. It wasn't just greed. Mom, she whispered, her voice cracking. It was fear. Miles is in deep. He didn't just borrow from a bank. He borrowed from a private investment group. They are loan sharks. Mum. He owes them over $200,000. He lost it all on online futures. Everything. I stared at her. My hands gripped the cold plastic of the phone. And you thought killing me was the solution. No, not killing. Just managing? Kendra stammered, tears spilling over. Miles told them about your assets. He showed them the appraisal of the house. He showed them your insurance policies. He used you as collateral. Mum? He promised them that after the birthday party, we would have control of the estate and could pay them back in full. But now the deadline is here, and they are not going to wait. I hung up the phone. The realization hit me harder than the silence of my deafness ever had. I was not just a mother to them. I was inventory. Miles had sold shares in my death to buy himself time. Detective Miller met me outside. He looked grim. We traced the threats, Miller said. These guys are serious. We want to put you in protective custody. A safe house until we can track down the source of the texts. No, I said. The wind was cold, but my resolve was colder. If I hide, they will burn my house down just to send a message. They will keep hunting. I am not going to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. What are you suggesting? Miller asked. I am the one with the money, I said. I am the one they want to pay up. So let me pay them. We set the trap. Miller was against it at first, but he knew we had no other way to identify the faces behind the threats. I sent a message to the number that had texted me. I know about the debt. I want to settle it to save my daughter. Meet me. Cash settlement. The reply came within 3 minutes. A time and a place. A coffee shop downtown. Crowded. Public. At 2 o'clock. I spent the morning preparing. I did not dress like the strong woman who had stood up in her living room. I put on my oldest cardigan. I wore shoes that looked orthopedic. I practiced a tremor in my right hand. I needed them to see a terrified, frail, old woman who was desperate to save her family. I needed them to feel safe enough to say the words that would put them in prison. Miller taped the wire to my chest, hiding the microphone beneath my blouse. "We will be everywhere," Miller said, adjusting the receiver in his ear, 2 officers at the counter, 1 near the door. "I will be in the van outside. Do not go to a second location. If they try to move you, you scream." Before I left the house, I went through the file cabinet one last time, looking for the insurance papers they had mentioned. My fingers brushed against a thick envelope I had missed before. I opened it. Inside was a property transfer deed. It was fully filled out, transferring the ownership of my home to a holding company I did not recognize. The date on the signature line was filled in for the day after my birthday party. They had been so sure. They had the paperwork ready before I had even swallowed the first pill. I drove to the coffee shop. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against the wire taped to my skin. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked weak. I looked vulnerable. It was the perfect disguise. I walked toward the entrance. The coffee shop was bustling with the lunchtime rush. It was loud, chaotic, and terrified me, but I forced myself to shuffle. I saw 2 men in suits sitting in the back booth. They did not look like bankers. They looked like sharks in human skin. I took a deep breath. I touched the recorder hidden against my ribs, feeling its solid presence. For 3 years, I had listened to lies. Today, I was going to listen to the truth. Today, I whispered to myself as I pushed open the door. I listened to finish it. The 2 men slid into the booth opposite me. They wore expensive suits that did not quite fit, as if they were trying to look like businessmen but could not hide the violence in their posture. The older one, a man with cold, dead eyes, pushed a coffee cup toward me. "Mrs. Hartman," he said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly polite. "We appreciate you coming. We want to resolve this debt Miles left behind. It would be a shame if..." Complications arose. Accidents happen to elderly women living alone all the time. Stairs are dangerous. Gas leaks are unpredictable. I made my hand tremble as I reached for my water. I lowered my head, looking at the table. "I just want to pay," I whispered, keeping my voice thin and reedy. "But I need to understand. How do you know I have the money? The house is old. It does not look like much." The younger man scoffed. "We know exactly what that dirt is worth. We saw the appraisal papers last month. $950,000, plus the 2 insurance policies. But who gave you those numbers?" I pressed, looking up with wide, fearful eyes. "Those are private documents. Your son-in-law was very thorough when he applied for the loan," the older man said, leaning in. "He assured us the collateral was secure. He said the house would be liquidated immediately after your birthday. He said, 'The old lady will be gone by Sunday.' That was the deal. But you are still here, and we are still waiting." That was it. The confession. They had confirmed knowledge of the conspiracy to end my life. I stopped shaking. I sat up straight, the tremor in my hand vanishing instantly. I looked the older man dead in the eye. "Miles was wrong," I said, my voice strong and clear. "I am not dead, and I am recording this conversation." The man's eyes went wide. He started to stand, reaching inside his jacket, but he was too late. "Police, nobody move." The shout came from 3 directions at once. Detective Miller burst out of the back room, weapon drawn. Uniformed officers swarmed the entrance. The two men were pinned to the table before they could even draw a breath. I watched them get cuffed, listening to the beautiful chaos of justice being served. The wire taped to my chest felt heavy, but it was the weight of victory. In the weeks that followed, the dust finally settled. Caleb Rourke finalized my new will. We established the Hartman Emergency Medical Fund, a trust designed to help nursing students and victims of elder abuse. It was ironclad. No one could ever touch it without my explicit, notarized permission. We also filed the Independent Medical Legal Capacity Evaluation, permanently blocking any future attempt by anyone to declare me incompetent. I did not stay in Hawthorne Ridge. The house was too full of ghosts. I sold it to a nice young couple who saw a home, not a dollar sign. I took the proceeds and moved 3 hours away to a small, fictional coastal town called Seabriar Cove. I received a letter from Kendra yesterday. It was sent from the state correctional facility. The handwriting was messy, desperate. She wrote pages about how sorry she was, how Miles had manipulated her, how she missed me. She asked if she could call. I did not cry. I sat at my new kitchen table, looking at the ocean through the window. I took a piece of stationery and wrote a single line. You are responsible for your choices. I am choosing my peace. I sealed the envelope and walked out to my front porch. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the water. I sat in my rocking chair and closed my eyes. I listened to the crash of the waves against the rocks. I listened to the cry of the seagulls. I listened to the wind chimes I had hung that morning, a delicate melody of glass and wood. For 3 years, silence had been my prison. Then, for a few terrifying weeks, sound had been my weapon. But now, as I sat there breathing in the salt air, I realized it was something else entirely. I listened to the world living around me, loud and chaotic and beautiful. Sound was not just a gift. It was the power that had saved my life. Thanks so much for sticking with Evelyn's journey until the very end. I'd love to connect with you guys. So drop a comment down below and let me know where you are listening from. Today, I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Nora Revenge Stories, smash that like button, and hit the hype button to help get this video out to more people. Catch you in the next one.